it's Guido coming at you with a tactics talk. We are just about to 1.0, and on this episode, we're going to do a throwback tactics talk. We're going to actually talk about a tank that's been out for a long time, the T-10. We're going to do a review on the T-10, and the reason is that I've been playing it quite a bit lately, getting ready for the new Tier 10, the follow-on to this that's unannounced. So I'm building up experience. You can see I've got 114,124 built up, and what I found along the way is this is a great little tank. Or a great big tank, however you want to look at it there. So we'll do the standard thing with my reviews. We're going to do an overview. We'll dive into the tech tree. There's actually a couple of interesting considerations there. We'll do a comparison with its peers. We'll take a look at tanks.gg so we can look at the armor layout. I'll show you my setup results so far in the tank, and then I've got two examples of gameplay on how to play the T-10. So we'll start with the overview here. You can see that it is a pike nose, although its lower plate is massive and flat. It looks like it's actually flatter than it is. These are two little water shields right here, splash guards to keep water from coming up on crossings. You can see that they're just little thin pieces of metal right there. So it's much like the IS-3 pike nose. Got massive fenders, pretty wide tracks, relatively low profile, and a rounded turret. Although you will find that this front armor is not very thick. Let's take a look at it. As far as comparisons, the ST, the 257, and the 705, the other Russian tanks, are roughly the same silhouette as far as height goes, although the ST is a little bit taller. You get into the ridiculous tanks like the Malshin and the Type 4, obviously those are massive. Let's take a look at the 103, a little bit taller. E75, quite a bit bigger, just all around big billboard-sided tank right there. 4502 is very similar. Conqueror is quite large. I didn't realize the Conqueror was that large, even in the length department. Just a very massive, big tank as compared to the T-10. That sort of makes me wonder if those scales are correct, but possibly. 5120, quite a bit larger, very tall. And of course, the supposed armored French tank, also very tall as compared to the T-10. So, benefits there are going to be a lower silhouette, a little bit harder to hit. It's still a heavy tank. None of them are really that difficult to hit size-wise, but it's all relative. Being able to hide behind things, that kind of deal, is going to be a little easier in the T-10. So let's move on to the tech tree considerations, but first we're going to take a slight detour into some historical information on this tank. Well, this is kind of interesting. The T-10 is actually a real tank, as in it was produced somewhere around 2,500 models actually went into service with the Soviet Army. It was involved in Prague, in the invasion there. That might be an IS-3, I'm not sure, but there's a time cover with, I believe it's the T-10 on there. You see actual historical pictures of it there in the squares. Another picture of it in the winter. Looks like one of the prototypes. There's one sitting at a tank, or, well, it's not a museum, but it's obviously on display. Couple more pictures there. There's another display model. So you can see that this is no kidding a tank that was operational, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of the Tier 9s and 10s can say that. A lot of them are just schematics or on the drawing board or were only produced as prototypes. Hey, we can see somebody load one of the guns. Oh, there's the fire button. That was fire in Russian. We go over here. Cyrillic? How do you say that? Cyrillic? I don't know. Some of the shells that it carries, hey, guess what? Ammo racks are all over the place. This is actually pretty good because most tanks' ammo racks are in roughly the same position, especially side, mid-hull is a great place to shoot them. There's a couple guns on racks. The engine, and what I thought was interesting, come down here and this little blurb right here which says, for a so-called breakthrough tank, the T-10's mobility was only half as good as that of a 50-ton second-generation Western tank, and its cruising speed is best described as sluggish. Add the T-10A's underwhelming TP2-27 stabilized gun sights, whose effective sighting range was less than 2 kilometers, and the result was a battlefield mediocrity, slow to move and slow to fire. Well, we clearly do not have that T-10 in the game, and like most of the tanks, when you upgrade the components, you've got some of the kind of fantasy or extra strong engines, that kind of thing. The T-10 happens to be quite quick in game, but it looks like it was something of a mediocre tank in the real world. Russian bias. Hey, it's all about game balance, and like I said, a lot of the modules, top modules on even historical tanks aren't actually historical, so you end up with essentially a better tank. A lot of them were planned upgrades that never happened, or just the fever dreams of some of the developers. But like I said, we have this T-10 in our game, so let's talk about that one. Failed to mention, as a quick note, this website is called the Soviet Armor Blog at blogspot.com or .blogspot.com. And this is the Tankograd section. It's actually pretty interesting there, and it's only one blog that I got this off, but I looked at a couple others, and it's basically similar information about the tank. But if you're interested in the tank because it actually existed and there's quite a bit of information out there, I recommend you check it all out. Let's move on to the tech. The tech tree reveals a couple interesting things about the T-10 line. Let's start at the back. You can see that coming soon. It is shaded out, so we do not know what that tier 10 tank is going to be. That's, as I mentioned, the reason I am currently building up experience so that I have enough. How much would be enough? I think the top tier 10 is around 279 or so, top tier 10 heavy. The lowest is in the low 200s, so I'm going to crank out 250, and hopefully that will be enough for whatever comes. If it's not quite enough, I will only have to knock out a little bit more. Realize you need to, if you have clicked the box where it puts all the experience to your crew, you need to unclick that, or you're not going to be building up experience on the tank. Just remember that. So the T-10 is a 4 crew member. I'm going to go backwards on this. The IS-3 is a 4 crew member. The IS is a 4 crew member, and the KV-85 is a 4 crew member. The KV-13 is a 4 crew member. But when you get back to the IS, it gets to 5. The A-44 is 5, and the A-43 is 5. Actually, we don't need the A-44. I forgot it doesn't go down. The reason I mention that is there's multiple ways to get to the T-10. So if you look at this kind of weird rambling route, obviously the IS-3 goes to it. You're going to need the IS to get to the IS-3. That's all pretty straightforward. But it's when we get to this intersection of the IS and the rest of it that it gets a little weird. If you were going to start from the very beginning, you have 2 ways to do it, starting at the T-80 or the T-28. So from the top, T-80 to T-34, down to A-43, down to KV-13, and then down to the IS. So you're taking mediums to get to a heavy. That's problematic for crew. The other way is coming from here, which is a medium, then jumping, over to KV-1, which is a heavy, then up to the KV-1S, and now from KV-1 on, you are dealing with heavy crews. So if you're going to come the KV-13 route, you're either going to get a new crew or you're going to be retraining a KV-13 crew. Perhaps you have other crews sitting around. Lots of different options there, but realize that's going to be your issue going from a medium to a heavy. The other thing about it, because it's so kind of odd, is there is no way to get to the IS without playing 2 tanks in the same tier, and I'll explain what I mean. You go to the A-43, you're in a tier 6. You go to the tier 7 KV-13, and guess what? That unlocks the tier 7 IS. Okay, so you're getting 2 tier 7s. Coming from the other way, you're going to go 1S to KV-5, tier 6, over to the tier 7 IS. I'm sorry, let's back up. This is where it is. I got a little ahead of myself. The two tanks that you will play in one tier will be down here at tier 5. You're going to go to the KV-1, but you have to then unlock the KV-1S, which is also tier 5. So you'll be playing 2 tier 5s or 2 tier 7s, whichever way you slice it. That's how you're going to have to do it. Bit of a bummer right there. I would recommend, if you're just going to do it the easiest route without messing around with too much crew, you're going to start in the T-28 to the KV-1, the 1S. Eat the 2 tanks at a same tier at a lower tier because it'll be much less experience. And then when you get to the KV-85, you'll be dropping off a crew member, and you're down to 4 crew, and now it's just smooth sailing onto the IS-3 to the IS-7. Also understanding that the IS splits out to the ISM, which unlocks another short line for another tier 10. Probably the best way to go. That was one of the longer descriptions of a tech tree that I've done on one of these reviews in a while, because that one's quite goofy. So make sure when you start and you look at it, you plan your route out as best you can. All right, let's move on to the comparison. All right, let's take a look at the comparison. I've got 9 of the different tier 9s called up here. This is not all of them, and I don't have either one of the derp tanks in here. They don't really compare exactly, so we're not going to take a look at either one of those. See the T-10 on the left going all the way across to the 257. Every one of these tanks is set up with 100% crew, no equipment, and no perks, so that you get a baseline with top modules, so that you get a baseline out of it that is comparable. Taking a look then, firepower-wise, it's decent. You see the Conqueror is number 1. That thing really spits out the lead and has good penetration. But if we look at the penetration, actually let's start here with the average damage. At 440 is right in there. You've got some 490 tanks with the WZ, E75, and the 4502, but 440 is reasonable. Penetration across the board is pretty similar for all these tanks. 258 is not bad for a standard round. Coming down here, rate of fire is up there at 5.09. Only the 103 really is better, and the the Conqueror at 5.54 on rate of fire. So it does reload fairly quickly. There's the time, not too bad on the low end of all those tanks, so it will spit the rounds downrange pretty well. Turret traverse is one of those things. Once you get above about 25, get close to 30, it's not going to matter a whole bunch. Although it's not as bad as the ST1 down at 18, so it's not a sluggish turret for a heavy, which is nice. Gun depression is -5, +15. That's problematic. -5 is really where you start getting into kind of annoying depression, where little bumps and pieces of rubble can really screw up shots, and you have a hard time using ridges. So that is something you definitely have to be aware of with this tank. It is not really a great ridge poker. It's a good turret fighter, or a decent turret fighter as far as going hull down. But if you're trying to use elevation and ridges to do that, that can be problematic. Aiming time is actually pretty good at 2.68. It's not Conqueror level, but it's not terrible at the same time. It's really towards the top end, but if you look at the ST1 with its horrendous 3.26, even the 257 is pretty good at 2.78, just slightly above it. Dispersion is decent. Not too bad. They're all really close if you look at this. You got 3.2 on the Conqueror and up to 3.8 with the 257, which has kind of a wonky gun, and the WZ with its wonky gun. But 36 is okay. This is where it really gets pretty good. Combining everything together, reload time, the average damage per shot and all that, you end up with the best DPM. I've talked about this in the past. DPM is not everything in this game. It's at best a secondary or tertiary consideration based on how World of Tanks is played. But it's nice to know that this thing will spit the rounds downrange and can put out the damage quickly if it needs to do so. Hit points are right in the middle of everything at 1800. Hull armor is low. It looks okay as in a comparison, although with the 103 at 228 and the VK at 200, this is top plate I'm talking about, 120 does look pretty anemic, but there are some weird angles on it, and you can get some decent bounces depending on how you're angling. Can be problematic because of the pike nose. We'll take a look at that on tanks.gg just a little bit right there. But you are not going to rely on this thing's armor. It can get the occasional bounce for you, but don't rely on it working out every time. The turret is decent at 250, but remember, with all these guys, its peers right around 250 with a standard round. That means most of their standard rounds have a pretty good chance of going through the turret. That's going to depend on angling and some other things like that. But it's not terrible. Not fantastic, but not terrible. Mobility is another place where this tank shines. 50 miles an hour, 15 in reverse. Tied for first with a couple of their tanks. One of them happens to be Soviet, the other one happens to be a Soviet clone, of course. That's really, in comparison to the discussion earlier on the historical aspect of this tank being sluggish, so clearly there's some other engine in there other than what was actually in the early production models of the T-10. But this is the tank we got, and so when you play this tank, you're going to rely on its mobility quite a bit, and we'll talk about that when we get into the replays. Coming down here to concealment, it's actually decent for a heavy tank. You're not a bush sniper. You're low profile though, so you're getting 6.07, not top in class. For some reason the WZ is even better. I don't quite understand that. They're about exactly the same kind of tank, but there you have it. These are some of the numbers that really, in my mind, Wargaming messes around with the most. The basis in reality in these numbers is hard to figure out sometimes, but that's all right. That's the game mechanic that we've got. Spotting, view range, all that stuff, who cares? So what would I say about this is just a quick look on the comparison. You've got a fast tank with good DPM, best in class as far as these comparisons, the tanks I'm comparing it against goes. Not a lot of armor and a decently accurate gun. So keep all that in mind. Those are the good things about this tank. Here we are in tanks.gg taking a look at the armor profile, and right away you can see, Houston, we've got a problem. It's all green. Effective armor 197, effective armor 211. You can tell that just about anything getting into the 200 regime, and that is most tier 8s and probably all of them with gold, and most tier 7s and probably all of them with gold as far as TDs and heavies go, getting very close, if not edging over 200, and not having a whole lot of trouble going through your plates right there. This is the angling I'm talking about that can be problematic. You definitely increase the armor profile of your lower plate. You've definitely, if for some reason you're able to bait a shot off the top or back edge of the slope, that's very good, obviously. But this right here, which is going to be the big billboard they'll be shooting for, gets even less. So that's the problem with a pike nose, and it's kind of interesting because this pike nose is just awful. It gets okay-ish straight on, but down here, just about anything's going through your lower plate. A lot of tier 7s are going to be able to manage 170, especially with gold. You can see that the turret, there's that nice thick turret, the good mantlet right there. But if we go up top, we'll tell that the back deck is at 16 and the upper turret is at 40, which is overmatchable with 122s with the 3x rule. So that is also a problem with this tank. You can be overmatched on the turret. On the side, definitely low armor profile right there. Even the turret is pinnable on the side. Remember, rounded turrets can be a problem. If you get back towards this edge, or he's turning his turret, he can quickly change the armor profile on that thing to something like that, depending on where you're trying to shoot into there. Now that is the tanks.gg look right there. Obviously the back is lightly armored like most of them. Let's talk about my setup and results so far. You'll see I've got all the top modules. That's just a given right there. Clearly I've got some camo on this as well. I am running the vertical stabilizer, the rammer, and the vents, which I think you don't get much better than that. That's the way to go. You'll see that I've got my tryhard set up. I'm carrying 12 heat, 16 AP, and 2 HE for those reset situations. The heat's a little on the high side. It's more than I usually carry. Like I said, I've been doing the tryhard thing with this tank. It's nice to have that when you start running into the super heavies and things, that you just dab number 2 and you have a much more reasonable chance of going through those guys from any direction. Normally I would carry about 6 heat on that thing. I've got a small kit and a small repair kit. I should probably upgrade that to heavy if I'm really going to go try hard. And like all my tanks, I'm carrying the automatic fire extinguisher. I just think that is definitely the way to go. Take a look at this. Dive over to statistics. I'm running 56%, 263 battles. This is an old tank. I've had this for a long time. I unlocked it when it was an IS-8. So my win rate's a little lower, I think, than it would be if I'd have just unlocked it recently. Still, damage ratio 1.93, 3.52 on the destruction. Armor use, I've talked about this before. When you get to around 1.0, that means you've got a pretty well armored tank. This is okay. It's not down at 0.10 or 0.20, but it's solidly in the middle of armor use efficiency, and probably on the low side, slight low side for a heavy tank, and that stands to reason based on what we looked at on the armor for this thing. Averaging 975 experience, which is decent, especially considering I unlocked this when I was not quite as good a player. Damage 2,600, kind of on the low side actually. 1,368 received, 1.17 spotted, 1.79 destroyed, and I've got a 10 kill battle in this. Pool's medal, which actually just happened recently, and is one of the reasons that I started to think about doing the analysis or the review on this tank. That will be a separate video of just the Pool's medal. I won't include it on this one. So doing pretty well in this tank, even considering I started playing it a long time ago when I wasn't quite as good in it. For the first replay, you'll see we're in a 3-5-7. I'm middle tier. We've loaded into Mountain Pass, and I have spawned into the northwest spawn, headed down to about the H3 area on the southwest corner. And we'll start doing a little brawling down there with the heavies. Notice that I'm not actually being outpaced by these mediums too much, even the Leopard PTA. You'll see that the Centurion is basically as fast as I am, if maybe a mile or two faster, but he's keeping up. I'm keeping up even with tracking down the T-54 E1. So for a heavy tank, this is quite a fast tank. And you can wolf pack with the mediums in this thing quite easily. We're going to move up here. The nice thing about a fast tank is it gets to the critical spots fast and is able to then start surprising the enemy, getting shots in. Oftentimes mediums and lights will be surprised by a T-10 who moves up quickly and aggressively and takes shots. And here's a good example. The Cran can't even get across to its spot right there before a T-10 shows up and puts a shot into him. He's shooting on the way. I'm seeing an opportunity to maybe get another shot on this guy. He really wants to get to cover. And I shoot into the ground. And I do have the Conqueror gun carriage to worry about. The spot I'm in is vulnerable to him. One thing I like to do in situations like that is sort of go dark for a while, see if I can't get him to forget about me. If I was to pop around the corner one more time, I'd probably eat a shot from the Cran and potentially get bombed by the CGC. I'm also worried about his buddies coming around that corner. There he is. He's looking the other way, so I'm just going to come out here and see if I can't do that right there. And there's that good forward and reverse speed. This thing is able to poke out much like a medium and be annoying like a medium, although it hits nice and hard like a heavy. Plus, while I'm not relying on the armor right there, I have a reasonable expectation that it's going to work for me. There's that accuracy. It's decent. And you might say, well, that was just lucky, or maybe Russian bias, all that good stuff. But hey, take those shots, and this tank can do that. I found that soft stats wise and the way the gun handles, it seems a little better than its numbers show. Whether that's Russian bias or just pure luck, I couldn't tell you. But I'll tell you this though, it does not feel like the 257's gun. So it's not on the level of a 2.5 or an IS-3. It feels a lot more accurate than that. 34B decides he wants to come up and get in front of me, and I think, well, if you want to poke and get them to fire, then let's just see if we can get them to fire at you, and I'll come around the corner and see if I can't pick up a shot on this guy. There we go. Spamming pure heat, obviously. Try hard mode to the max. And I'm going to push across. Missed him, unfortunately. This is a good spot to get up to on this map. You do have to watch the artillery. You can get kind of rocked by the artillery, but you can see that rock right there, while you're getting rocked by the artillery, is helpful. Unfortunately, the Skoda got behind that other rock. I'm not able to take a shot on him. Poking around this other side here, looking at these guys, will expose you to shots. Should have gone after the mill right there. That's the guy we need to get rid of. Bounced him. The tank does have a relatively low ammo count. That went right in the ground. A very low chance of getting to his roof anyway. Once he came down and flattened it out, that was going to be hard. Team's not doing great. We're down a couple good tanks, so we need to really do something different right here and get these guys out if we can. I went to HE to see if we can't work him down. There he goes. Didn't even realize I still had the HE round, but I'll take that 200 off of him. Skoda is still sitting up behind there waiting for one of us to do something silly, come around the corner. We can't really advance, but here comes the E100. Now he's doing the thing we need to have done. There's that accuracy again, made it happen. Another shot into him. Lord Yort is getting on it. I'm going to sort of reverse side scrape out of here going forward just to minimize the exposure. There's a bounce. They both fired, so I'm going to take that opportunity to move into this other T-10. There's another bounce. So again, I'm not really completely relying on the armor, but it is working out for me. If I keep low right here, I have to be careful. There are a few shots, few lanes where he can get shots, where those two on the corner can get shots on me if I'm not careful. Go for his lower plate. Switched over to regular AP at this point. Got to watch that Conqueror. He's looking for a shot on my back. So I'll move up here to use this lower, little ridge to shield myself. There he is. Just gonna go around this guy, take him down. And now we'll come around the other side of the Conqueror, and the team is still losing. But I'm changing the angle. The Centurion's got a bunch of guys trapped down in the hole down there. I'm not really sure why they're down there, to be quite honest. There's another bounce, so that's just kind of baiting those shots. That's a great example. If you remember, the Conqueror out reloads this tank. So we both fired roughly the same time. I took a chance trying to get the reload going so I could actually get the shot on him. And I ended up eating a shot I maybe didn't need to take. Trying to figure out where the Emil is. He's on this backside here. Got the Centurion. So with two of us, we should be able to take him down. Actually three. There's somebody else with us right there. There's that. See that right there? There's that -5 depression really getting in my way. That weird little bump where that road is cost me. And a couple times I had to sort of rearrange what I was doing. And it cost me getting a shot in there earlier. Alright, so I go after the 268 because the Emil should be on a reload. And what I don't want is for him to notice me there, turn around and drop that 650 or 750 or whatever it is that he's got on me. Start messing around with the Emil. There we go. He was on a reload, which is why I just went past him and went after the 268. I'll just scoff him with his reload, go kill that guy who's actually going to be able to shoot me if he can spin fast enough. Plus I've got friends in there helping me out. Now here's the speed of the T-10. Alright, so we saw a little bit of the -5 being an issue. We saw how the armor can actually work, but you really have to kind of jink and jive and give him weird angles and not give him a really solid shot. That applies to everything, but because of this thing's relatively low armor for a heavy, I was actually able to bounce a decent amount from relatively good guns at 1,780. And then here's the speed. Really just medium speed. You'll notice that the two clowns I was with are going to their cap, which is hard to understand, but there you go. And I've basically crossed across the entire map, and if I was in one of the other heavies, I'd probably still be back by the bridge right here, right about now, or maybe a little further back. They're just not nearly as fast. I got that kind of medium speed zinging on up here. Got a T-30. Taking on the poor little ISM and the 100.01. Down he goes, and these two guys think, alright, we got to get to cap. And the T-30 says, oh geez, that's not good. Take him down. And I've got a 100.01. This guy can be a bit of an issue for me. Pretty good armor. Hits pretty hard. Does not reload anywhere near as fast as I do. So what I'm looking for is get my reload finish here and then try to get that first shot and maybe shield myself from taking the second. There you go. Move up. Gone to heat. And now I'm just going to go at him. There's another bounce. And watch this. So you basically have a close to medium maneuver capability, and I'm just circling the 100.01. Granted, it is a great big fat heavy tank. One of the slower ones in the game, so that's clearly not going to work against some of the faster heavies. And by work, I mean keeping them from being able to get their gun on them. It's still a good idea to try to spoil and disrupt shots. But I think you saw a little bit of everything that I talked about with the T-10 on its strengths and weaknesses right there. Not a bad game. 5,653, 2,220 blocked, and 5 kills. This ends up being an ace tanker for this tank. So let's move on to the next example. For example 2, we're on proc. The first one was kind of a peek-a-boom example as far as being relatively close, using cover, and fighting in one of the corridor type maps, down a corridor. If you look for my Pools Metal video, which will be up relatively soon, that one's in a city. So I'll give you an example of the T-10 in a city. This one is one of the most wide open maps in the game, proc. You see that we have spawned down in the south spawn, and I'm headed up to the 5-6 line. Initially, I was going to go up the hill based on the speed of the tank. It's a good position for faster tanks. But I decided as I looked at the way the deployment was going, not a single person was headed straight north to this point. So I thought I'd take the T-10, and I wanted to see what it could do in more of a kind of traditional medium spot over here, looking to control the 9-0 line on the back slope of the hill right there, and potentially to flex across the map, or to just hold down the 5-6 line if they try to push up and over and near here. The other thing that helped me with my decision is there's no arty, right? So this is a very dangerous spot right here. If there's arty, fairly lightly armored for a heavy tank, arty does eat these things up pretty well. But there's no arty, so you'll see that we've got a lot of ridge poking right here. People are much more active and interested in trying to play the tank game instead of whack-a-mole. And there's that accuracy. I just drop a shot on the T-49 right there. So what do we got? We got an object that jumped up into the bowl. He's being super aggressive. That's something he can do because he is not facing artillery. You'd never go there at about E2, E3 with an Object 7.5 if there was any artillery involved. There's that push over thing going on. This Patton's very foolish. Looks like he wants to get a piece of me. He does. And that nice fast reload. I'm able to take him down. We push those guys back. Now we've got some heavies pushing up and over, attempting to take our guys on the hill. Once you start hitting guys over there in the side, they become much more cautious, and you're going to have a harder time getting shots once they realize you're down there. And it's likely he realized I was down there, but by realize I'm down there, I mean realize I'm down here and shooting at them. Sometimes you can work that hill and the guys here are too busy, but this is not the case right here. I do need to be careful about coming up and over and getting shot in the side from the guys on my left, especially with anybody that's got a decent turret. That was a good kill. Getting that stirb out of the way is very helpful. I'll apologize in advance. There's going to be some map spam here because I'm getting massively irritated that there are 3 tanks on the back slope of the hill. If we can just clear those guys off of the E0 area, it makes this battle pretty much over. And we just lost a T-10. I'm just trying to get these guys. Look, these guys are tearing us up. The guys on the 1-2 line are camping too far back. We're just in kind of a bad position right here overall. There we go. There's a light up on the hill. I don't quite see it yet. And I'm going to be a little over aggressive here looking for this guy. I was lit, and I'm probably still lit here, and he sees me come up. And I eat that shot right in the side. So that was not a good trade for me. I think I was still lit, and when I moved up, he just, even if I went dark, he just fired into where it was dark. He's seeing somebody else, he just fired at the guy next to me. Down into the dirt. A little bit frustrating there. The E75's got him lit, but he's getting crushed. He doesn't really understand what he's supposed to be doing right there is light and get back. The problem, though, with an E75 in that position is he's too tall. So his big billboard side is being exposed to all those guys at about E5 and 6, all the reds sitting there, and they just tore him apart. Whereas the T-49 can get in there, pop up, light these guys, and pop back down. There's actually a ridge up there. I've showed this on multiple videos where you can be relatively protected. Got lit by somebody in front of me. Looks like the Centurion right there. And he's popping over with pretty good depression. That's problematic because the guys on the hill are too far back. That guy on the back slope, the one heavy that's there, is not keeping that Centurion honest. The T-95 does something very foolish, drives right up. That's very helpful, exposing himself like that and letting us kill him. We lost the tank doing it, and I'm starting to see that we got a bit of an issue over here on the left side, and that's where the combat power that we have is. So I'm not looking for shots, and I'm thinking I'm going to need to flex over to the left, over to the west side, and see if I can't help all these TDs and campers in the back do something with their guns. See how nothing's lit? They're all just literally sitting there waiting for someone else to get a light. Not one of them is being any kind of active or aggressive. Still looking for the opportunity here. All we need is that T-49 to come over there and see if he can't light those guys up. And you see that the Centurion keeps lighting me up because he has free reign to pop up and over. He's not being threatened by anybody. I see the 1390. I see the 430 getting aggressive, and this can be a real problem. If they roll up our left side, it's all over but the shouting. So I'm going to flex. See that guy right there? Bounce him, unfortunately. 1390 dies, that's helpful. I do have to dive down here because I'm still in draw distance for the guys on the hill. That evened things up a little bit better right there. I see the 103. I know there's a 430 and an E50 over here. I see this opportunity. It's stagnated over on the middle to east side. I don't know why I take this shot. I thought I was trying to go through that. It's stagnated on the other side, and I see an opportunity to come over here and clean up what's going on this side of the map. We've got to somehow facilitate all these guys hiding in one corner doing something for this game. So I know that 430 is sitting in this hole right here. He's not really paying attention to me. And I get a shot into him. Bounce the E50. There's that rounded turret. I didn't expose myself anymore, and I really had to. There he is sitting right there. Using the correct technique for coming up a little sideways so I can actually get a shot in on that E50. Gun depression is fighting with me. I get a little high and I don't have it. About right there I've got it, and there's that overmatch on the roof, or maybe through the hatch, I'm not sure. Actually that was heat, so I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe I went right through one of the hatches. Does heat overmatch? I can't remember. There we go, right into his turret. Regardless of whether heat overmatches or not, it does add a bunch of pen. So you can just go through the strongest part of the tank. The WZ takes a hit and goes down. The Centurion is in a bad spot. I'm actually going to side scrape off this rock right here. Counting noses, I know the only other two they have are up on the hill, so they're no factor. I can just start working on this Centurion. Popping out, shooting him, coming back in, minimizing my exposure. Change my side scrape a little bit. He's looking at multiple spots. He can't really defend from everybody, and down he goes. That's the problem with 5-6 line. Once you lose the west side, you're pretty much hosed. There's no escape route to get out of there. And you're going to die in place. Last guy's running across, and Wacko will take him down. So that's a win. Ace, 4,930. 780 blocked with 1,900 assists and 5 kills. Ace tanker in the T-10. But you can see that it is usable on the more wide open maps. This was brought to you by the lack of Arty. So remember, a lot of things I did right there were purely because there wasn't an artillery unit in the game. Or had I done them anyway, which I probably would have, I would have been taking more hits from artillery because I was one of the more active tanks out there. All those guys down at K1 who were camping together, you have to assume they would still be alive at the end if there was artillery, since they were never spotted. Anyway, that's another subject. Well, all right, everybody, that is it for the T-10 review. It's an oldie but a goodie. A little bit of a throwback review there. If you haven't gone through the line, or if you have and you're going to revisit it in order to unlock the whatever the future tier 10 is going to be, I highly recommend this tank. I think this is definitely a keeper, especially if you're at the upper end of skill in the game. The mobility, accuracy of the gun, and the sometimes armor is a great combination. It really is just a large medium in gameplay and can swing to the heavy roll and do a decent job of it when needed. So it's a good tank. Take a look at it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate your support as always. Keep on supporting the channel, and we will see you.